We cover 14 counties, and it was considered more of a pilot program because we didn't know how it was going to look or success or not. We were splitting the ropes program in half. We're saying the ropes are only going to do the community piece, and we're going to take all the first responders, being police, fire, and EMS. And by doing that, we were worried about their workload and our workload and how's that going to look.
We had to really get creative, see what their program was really about. So we went the first few trainings and we were actually a part of their training. So Josh would do his thing, and then when it came to the Naloxone training, me or Dustin would actually do the Naloxone training. And then it kind of developed into Josh doing the entire training.
We found in the end it to be quite effective, that they were able to focus more on community stuff and be epic at that. And then we found a niche in first responders.
And at first it took a little adjusting, but now we don't have any issues with it whatsoever.
We started out with a very basic presentation that looked a lot like the ropes that we just pitched from a different perspective. The feedback we got from that was overwhelming. It was very emotional. It was very intense. And from that, we revamped the entire presentation and added in more things that were more specific to that level of stigma, what drives it, and why it's important that we have these programs that are very specific for first responders.
Josh's training is kind of the initial part of our whole program, because he talks about compassion fatigue and burnout with first responders and how their own mental health affects the individuals that they come in contact with on the street.
We didn't know how deep we were going to get into that at first, but I found giving somebody the power to feel like they can be open and honest in a room without fear of repercussion went a long way. We specifically cover information about illicit fentanyl and carfentanil and the scary drugs that everybody has their own. That's a whole nother level of stigma. And we cover it from how it affects them professionally and the dangers behind it, or the perception of danger behind it, depending on how you address it. And those raise some hard questions, like some scientific questions.
We knew it was going to happen. We all had our perspective. Go through the Narcan class again, but the way it was presented today, even out the door, as the officers were leaving, they're like, man, that was pretty neat.
And so it was key to have the piece that Erica built, and it's grown beyond what we ever thought it would be too. We're like, hey, we can refer people to treatment. Well, Lifeline can do that, the Navigators can do that. So what's different? Well, we're taking specifically only from first responders.
There's a couple of different situations that happen. A lot of times with EMS, they do not have the time to spend there with the individual, so they'll hand out our resource and the individual will either call me that night, the next week, or in a few months, depending on when they're ready. Law enforcement is really the ones that call me in the moment, and so it really depends on the situation. Sometimes they will pull someone over that has paraphernalia and maybe a small amount of substances on them, and we'll give them the option to go to treatment or go to jail. So I will normally speak to the individual on the officer's phone to determine what level of treatment they need based on the information that they give in their current situation, and then we'll work with treatment facilities to get them in as soon as possible.
Working with Erica is different than anything else when it comes to trying to get people in rehab. But the way that she's doing it is completely new compared to what we've done in the past. Before, you would try and send somebody or get somebody into rehab, and it's a day, 2 days, 3 days. With her, it's even 2-3 hours and somebody's ready to go.
We know addiction is not a 30-day program and done. Recovery is a lifestyle that has to be maintained just like any other disease. So we follow up with them for 12 months to ensure that they have the tools that they need to succeed.
She makes it look easy, and it's not easy. Other people have tried to recreate it. It's extremely difficult, and she makes it look easy.
It just allows me to practice compassion because I understand where these individuals are. I'm able to meet them where they're at with no judgment. I'm able to really just speak to them on their level. I'm not there to judge them or tell them what they need to do. I'm there to support them.
It's overwhelming to see the wake effect you can have in a community. Take one person out who is in that realm and is committing these smaller crimes only because they're trying to survive every day, and that's their means of survival. And when they no longer need that, that affects a dozen or more families in the community. And in smaller communities, especially the rural areas, a lot of ones we work in, they're related to everybody, and everybody knows them, and they all grew up together. And so doing that changes generations of lives around that very community in these smaller counties.